I was deported right after giving birth, but I crossed the desert to save my daughter. Claudia was born on a rainy Tuesday in San Juan Alotenango, a town nestled among volcanoes, black soil, and broken stone streets in the interior of Guatemala. Her mother, Carmen Mendez, brought her into this world alone, assisted only by a neighbor who had learned to deliver babies more out of necessity than vocation. Claudia's father left when Carmen was 3 months pregnant. Nobody knew if he ran away, died, or just decided to vanish. What was certain was that, from day one, Claudia's existence would depend on her mother's strength and nothing else. Carmen wasn't affectionate. She was practical, tough, spoke little, and acted decisively. She worked from dawn to dusk on a small sewing machine inherited from her grandmother, sewing school uniforms, mending farm workers' pants, and making quinceañera dresses she would never see worn. Claudia grew up hearing the ceaseless rattle of that machine, watching her mother stretch every penny to buy corn, soap, and toilet paper. There were no luxuries, not even a TV, but there was dignity, and that weighed more than any object in the house. If you enjoy interesting stories, give it a like, subscribe to our channel, ring the notification bell to never miss any of our content, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. Since she was little, Claudia was sharp, curious, with a serious gaze and a sensitive soul. She taught herself to read, using the old papers wrapping the market bread. By 8, she knew how to sew on buttons. By 10, she was already helping her mother with the sewing so they could deliver more orders and maybe eat something beyond tortillas and salt. Some nights, when hunger tightened its grip, Carmen would sit on the kitchen floor with her daughter, stale bread in hand, and tell her, "Learn this well, my girl. Life doesn't grant permission to rest. And remember, a mother never gives up, even if the whole world's spitting in her face." Claudia didn't fully understand the phrase back then, but she kept it the way one keeps an important secret, deep in her chest. Adolescence was a troubled time. Claudia didn't know her father, and men in town weren't protectors, they were the opposite. Since she was 12, she felt the dirty stares of some older neighbors, the suggestive remarks, the unspoken warnings her mother caught instantly. So Carmen kept her close everywhere she went. Claudia didn't attend many parties or have girlfriends to sneak out with. Her world was her house, her mother, the sewing machine, and the sound of rain pounding on the tin roof. At 15, Carmen fell ill. First it was a cough that wouldn't go away, then fevers, cold sweats, chest pain. They took her to the nearest health post, where a nurse without a coat or gloves said it might be tuberculosis, that she needed tests, treatment, medicine, and money, which they didn't have. Claudia tried everything. She asked neighbors for help, sold the sewing machine, went to the market to wash dishes at a stall that paid her in food. Still, her mother's body steadily faded. She died quietly one July morning while Claudia slept beside her. When she woke and saw the still body, she didn't cry right away. It took hours for her to understand that this body that had always been so strong, that woman who never gave up, was gone. She buried her mother with help from the church and a handful of townspeople. She had no siblings, no close uncles or aunts, just a distant aunt in Chiquimula whom she spoke to occasionally. From then on, Claudia was completely alone. The next few years felt like struggling upstream through a filthy river. She worked however she could, sold tamales, washed other people's clothes in the river, carried bundles at the market, and sometimes had to endure indecent proposals from men who wanted to help, in exchange for something she refused to give. The world wasn't kind to a young woman alone, without an education or family. But Claudia had something others didn't, her mother's stubbornness, that inner flame that neither wind nor water could extinguish. At 21, her chance came. A friend from the market told her about a contact organizing trips to the United States. It wasn't legal, cheap, or safe, but it was a door, an opportunity. Claudia didn't hesitate. She sold what little she had, took out a loan that would take years to repay, and left town on a moonless morning. The journey started on a battered bus that took her to the border with Mexico. Then came the walks, the checkpoints, hiding places, nights on the ground, and days without eating. In a warehouse in Oaxaca, she was told to climb onto a truck carrying fruit north. They hid her among boxes of papayas and pineapples with a bottle of water and a bag of stale bread. She traveled with 3 others, but nobody spoke. Fear had sealed their mouths. The heat inside the truck was unbearable. The air was thick, stifling, as though you could only half breathe. Claudia sweated, shivered, prayed. Sometimes she thought of jumping off and returning, but she didn't even know where she was. She closed her eyes and, amid the terror, whispered softly, as if her mother could hear, "A mother never gives up." Even though she wasn't a mother yet, she felt something inside was preparing her to be. A few days later, stepping into Los Angeles for the first time, she didn't do so with a smile, but with a knot in her stomach. She was alive. Illegal, scared, alone, but alive. For now, that was enough. The city welcomed her with dry air full of noise, smoke, and disorienting speed. Everything was so different from what Claudia knew. Wide streets, buildings like mountains, and people who wouldn't look her in the eye. She felt unseen, like just another ghost among thousands of faces rushing along, as though time here was more expensive than in her homeland. She arrived at a house in South Central, recommended by a Salvadoran woman she'd met in the last leg of the trip. The place was a small home divided into 4 rooms, each one rented by a different family. Claudia got an old sofa in the living room, in exchange for cleaning and cooking for the others. It wasn't much, but it was a start. She didn't sleep well the first few weeks. Any little noise woke her. She had nightmares about immigration, about U.S. uniforms ripping her from bed, yelling in a language she didn't understand. She only left the house to go to the supermarket or search for under-the-table work on the streets where they hired undocumented people. She learned to say cleaning lady, no speak English, and cash only. She started out cleaning offices at night, and during the day looked after an old woman with dementia in Glendale. It was tough, but she got by. Every 2 weeks, she sent money to her aunt in Guatemala. Sometimes, if she was lucky, she bought a sweet roll and coffee at the corner near her job. That was her monthly treat. Days crawled by in silence. Most of her conversations were with strangers on the bus or with other migrant women as scared as she was. They rarely spoke about the past or the future, only the present, next month's rent, the next shift, the next paycheck. Claudia wrote letters she never sent, addressed to her mother, telling her how life was up there. She kept them in a shoebox under the sofa. In one of them, she wrote, "Sometimes I feel I only exist when someone needs me. Nobody calls me by my name. Here, I'm the lady who cleans, the girl in the kitchen, the one caring for the old man. But I'm still here, Mom, because you taught me never to give up." One night, while cleaning a supermarket restroom in North Hollywood, she met Kyle. He was a regular, blonde, tall, with an easy smile, clumsy but endearing Spanish. At first, they just said hello. Then he began waiting for her outside. He invited her for coffee. She hesitated, trusting no one, especially not a seemingly too curious American. But Kyle was sweet, not invasive, just patient. "You don't have to speak perfect English," he'd say. "I like the way you talk." After a few weeks, Claudia agreed to get coffee in a cheap neighborhood place. Kyle told her about his job in a mechanic shop, his sick mother in Arizona, his hard childhood. She hardly spoke, didn't know how much to reveal, but he was attentive, never pushed her. Over time, Kyle started appearing more often. He brought her flowers, Salvadoran tamales, a scarf when he noticed she was cold. Claudia began trusting him. For the first time since she arrived, she felt someone was truly seeing her. They spent their first night together in a modest motel room in Alhambra. Claudia was nervous, but let things happen. It wasn't magic or a movie romance. It was human, awkward, real. Afterwards, Kyle kept visiting her. Sometimes he'd vanish for days and come back with excuses. He was busy, his car broke down, he had problems at work. Claudia wanted to believe him, wanted to think he wasn't like the men back in her village, that it would be different this time. 3 months later, her body told her something had changed. Nausea, dizziness, fatigue. At first, she thought it was stress, but then she counted the days and understood. She was pregnant. She told Kyle one afternoon at the same cafe where they'd first had coffee. He listened in silence, didn't smile, didn't cry, just stared at his cup. He said he needed time, then left and didn't come back for weeks. Claudia didn't go looking for him or cry. She didn't allow herself to break. She knew she couldn't rely on anyone. Stroking her belly, she murmured, just like her mother had, "You and me, my love, nobody else. And we won't give up." Life became harsher with the pregnancy. The nausea didn't let her work as before. She had to give up one of her jobs, so the money wasn't enough. Even so, she pressed on, sleeping little, eating less, and every night praying not to be arrested. But fate, always cruelest to those who have the least, had other plans. In her 8th month, on a random early morning, the unthinkable happened. A raid by ICE in her neighborhood changed her life forever. The early hours of April 22nd started like any other in Claudia's neighborhood. Distant dogs barking, the hum of a worn-out transformer, and the murmur of TVs in the distance. Claudia was asleep on the same old couch, a pillow between her legs to relieve the pressure of her belly. She was about to enter her 9th month of pregnancy, her feet swollen, her back sore, her insomnia constant. That night, though, something felt off in the air. She wasn't sure if it was intuition, a hunch, or her body warning her of what was coming. At 4:15, the crash of a smashed door tore through the silence, followed seconds later by shouts in English, "Federal agents! Immigration!" Claudia barely got up in time. The entire house was swarmed by men in bulletproof vests, black boots and rifles, barking orders she didn't understand. Her hands shook, her breath caught in her throat. One of the women living in the back room began to cry. A child screamed. Claudia just lifted her arms, repeating the only thing she could. "I'm pregnant. Please, don't hurt me." One agent looked at her blankly, while another checked everyone's papers. None had valid documents, none had legal status. That was enough. They pressed Claudia against the wall, cuffed her wrists loosely because of her condition, saying she'd be taken for immigration processing. "My baby, I'm about to give birth," she pleaded, but no one seemed to listen. In under an hour, she was loaded into a windowless white van. Outside, some neighbors peeked through half-open curtains, silent and powerless. Such was the fear in the air, fear of becoming invisible in the country of the visible. The detention center was on the outskirts of Los Angeles, cold, metallic, without windows, lights never fully off. Claudia was frisked, searched, interrogated by an officer who spoke Spanish without an accent. She was asked her name, her country, her record, if she spoke English, if she had family in the U.S. Each reply was noted, as though final. She tried explaining her pregnancy, asked for a doctor, said she'd been having false contractions at night, but was told she'd see one when possible. Then she was taken to a cell with 6 other women, stiff bunks, thin blankets, a toilet without a door. Time became meaningless. The days neither started nor ended. 3 days went by. Claudia could hardly eat or sleep, stressed, scared, with no appetite. Another detainee, an older Honduran named Irma, helped her stand and walk so her feet wouldn't swell further. "You gotta hang on, child. Don't give birth here. You'll see, you'll get out of this." But Claudia's body couldn't wait. In the early hours of the fourth day, she felt a crushing pressure and dropped to her knees. She screamed, feeling warm liquid running down her legs. Her water broke. Her body was making way for life in the worst place ever. An alarm sounded. Within minutes, they put her on a gurney and rushed her to a hospital, guarded by 2 agents. On the way, the pain was indescribable. She screamed for her mother, cried until she had no tears, gripping the gurney's rails as if holding on to life itself. The hospital was cold, modern, impersonal. They placed her in a delivery room where nobody spoke Spanish. An Asian nurse held her hand, while another hooked her to an IV. There were no kind words or caresses, just the machine recording her baby's heartbeat. Claudia felt the rest of the world vanish until it was only her. And the girl, labor lasted hours. She pushed until she couldn't, screamed with everything she had left. Then the cry, loud, clear, unforgettable. It was Amelia. The nurse laid the baby on her chest. Claudia looked at her, brown skin, dark hair, so tiny, perfect. They both cried. The nurse silently wiped Claudia's tears, showing a tenderness Claudia would remember forever. For an instant, everything else disappeared. Fear, sadness, the prison. Only that moment existed. It was short-lived. Hours later, while she still wore the blood-stained hospital gown, legs numb from the epidural, Kyle walked in without knocking, escorted by a man in a grey suit. Claudia could barely sit up. Kyle didn't look at her the way he used to. His voice was cold, urgent. "I want to see my daughter. She's mine. I have rights. She's an American citizen." Claudia felt her world shatter. She couldn't understand what was happening. The man in the suit explained that Kyle had asked for custody of Amelia as the biological father, and that, given Claudia's undocumented status, it was best for the baby to be with him. "It's temporary," they said. "Just sign here and you'll see her again soon." She had no lawyer, didn't speak enough English, was alone, exhausted, stitches still fresh, breasts full of milk, while her daughter lay in another room. She signed. 2 days later, she was forced out of the hospital. No goodbyes, no hug. They put her on a plane back to Guatemala, seated, body still broken, heart destroyed. The uniform they gave her shielded her from the cold, but not the emptiness. She carried no luggage, just some papers and a soul in pieces, and her chest so full of milk with no one to feed. The plane landed in Guatemala City, and Claudia felt she was stepping into another planet. It didn't feel like returning to her country, but like exile, as though she was expelled from her own story, torn from herself. The local migratory agents barely glanced at her before stamping her deportation paper. They returned a plastic bag mislabeled with her name, containing only an old change of clothes, some English documents, and the copy of the paper she'd signed in the hospital. Nothing else. The hot, humid tropical air seared her face. Each step from the airport felt like walking under a blazing judgment. She had nowhere to go. Nobody waited for her. Her aunt in Chiquimula just texted that she was sick and couldn't take her in. Claudia sat on a concrete bench without moving, watching passenger traffic as if it were from another dimension, her eyes dry, her spirit numb. She took a bus headed inland, and nobody asked or offered help. People were crammed together, sweaty, with bags at their feet and children sleeping in laps. Claudia fit nowhere, physically, yes, but not in spirit. It was as though she'd left her true self suspended in some corner of California and now dragged a fake life behind her. Back in the village where she was born, she found the old house in ruins, boarded windows, collapsed roof, the sewing machine rusted in a corner. She sat on the dirt floor, staring at the chipped walls like ghosts of the past. That house where her mother had raised her, taught her to sew, to endure, to be silent, was now only silence. The following days were the same. Aimless, pointless. Townsfolk watched her with pity. Some asked why she came back so soon, if people get rich over there. Others gossiped that she must have done something wrong to be deported. Nobody asked about Amelia. Nobody suspected the tragedy behind Claudia's hollow stare. She hardly slept, barely ate. Her body still hurt, especially her infected C-section stitches. A local midwife cleaned her wounds, gave her herbs for the pain, but what really hurt had no cure. Her breasts kept producing milk, the cruelest reminder of her absent daughter, possibly crying and hungry. She tried to find her baby's trail, contact Kyle. She WhatsApped, emailed from a cybercafe. No response. She dialed the few numbers she remembered. One was out of service. Another was answered by a voice that hung up the moment it heard her name. Then the nightmares started. Each night she dreamed of Amelia, not as the newborn she last saw, but in some future form, in strangers' arms, crying inconsolably, calling mommy in a language she didn't get. She woke drenched, screaming, arms flailing into the void. Weeks went by. Then one afternoon, her borrowed phone rang with an unknown number. Claudia answered breathlessly. "Is this Mrs. Claudia Mendez?" "Yes, I am. We're calling from the Los Angeles County Children's Hospital about your daughter, Amelia." Claudia lost her breath for a moment. She had to sit. The world echoed. What happened? Is she okay? What did they do to her? She was admitted 3 days ago with a high fever, dehydration, signs of neglect. The father can't be found. We need a responsible guardian. She cries endlessly and only calms down when listening to recordings of your voice. Someone provided us an audio of you speaking Spanish. We wanted to see if you can come. Claudia didn't cry. She collapsed to her knees in the middle of the room, howling, pounding the floor with her fists as if trying to release her agony. She couldn't think straight, only hearing her mother's voice ring in her head. A mother never gives up. She crawled into a corner and spent the night there, eyes open, without food, unmoving. At dawn, she went looking for help. No one in her town knew how to cross again. Some said it was madness, that she could die. But somebody, a kindly older woman known as Tia Rosa, said, "I know of a group, women like you, deported moms. If you still have the strength, if you still have a soul, we'll help you get back." Claudia didn't hesitate. "I have milk in my chest, soul in my body, and my daughter's waiting for me." Tia Rosa took Claudia's hands and looked her in the eye. "Then get ready, girl, because what comes next isn't for just anyone." Tia Rosa's words weren't metaphorical. It truly wasn't for everyone. That same afternoon, Claudia was taken to a house hidden among coffee fields on the outskirts of Esquipulas. There was no signal, no neighbors, no authorities. Only women from Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Mexico, some with children in the U.S., others with missing kids, many with stories similar to hers, all sharing the same wound in their hearts: separation. Tia Rosa was a legend among them, having crossed the border over 6 times in different eras. Now in the shadows, she ran a clandestine network to help mothers who'd lost everything but their will. She didn't charge or promise anything. She only provided a way forward, a punishing one. Claudia spent 3 days in that house, not really resting. She had no peace. Every minute away from Amelia tormented her. The other women comforted her, fed her, talked to her. Some already knew of her story, which had spread through migrant WhatsApp groups as the mother who signed and lost her baby, the one deported with fresh stitches, the one whose breast still dripped milk, sobbing uncontrollably. Claudia didn't want fame. She just wanted her daughter. The night before leaving, Tia Rosa sat with her in the dirt-floored kitchen. "Tomorrow, the toughest part begins. We'll cross through Sonora, not the usual route. It's longer, with fewer patrols, but more deaths. Sure about this? Claudia didn't waver. My baby's alone. I have no right to rest until she's in my arms. Tia Rosa nodded, handing her a plastic rosary and a bag with 2 changes of clothes, some dried tortillas, purified water packets, salt tablets, and a thin blanket. Don't carry more than needed. The desert will strip you to your soul. Don't let it also steal your hope. They set out before dawn, boarding a bus to Tapachula, then another up to northern Chiapas. They slept in stops, hidden among trees or sheds. Claudia traveled with 3 women, Julia from Tegucigalpa, who left 2 small daughters behind, Marta, a 16-year-old with the gaze of an old woman, and Esther, nearly 60, searching for her lost grandson. None spoke much. Exhaustion and fear were their shared language. They reached Hermosillo 10 days later, scorched by the sun, emaciated, sore. A local contact welcomed them, a dark-faced man called El Gavilan, in charge of guiding them through the final stretch, the Sonoran Desert, crossing into U.S. soil. Before departure, in a low monotone, El Gavilan said, "On this route, if anyone falls, the group can't stop. Every minute can cost our lives. Whoever falls behind stays." Understood. They all nodded. Claudia didn't heed his warning. Her mind was on Amelia, her eyes, her wails, that call from the hospital, the emptiness hollowing her out. She entered the desert on foot. The midday sun was brutal. No trees, no shade, nowhere to rest. Shoe soles melted, tongues dried, skin cracked. Claudia began bleeding between her legs. Each step was torture. Sometimes black splotches swam before her eyes. She thought she heard Amelia calling her, unsure if it was real or delirium. Their first night was hell. Heat vanished, replaced by icy cold. She shivered uncontrollably. There was nowhere to lie down. The wind chewed her bones. Marta, the young girl, silently cried. Julia vomited blood. Esther's lips were cracked and bleeding. None spoke, only trudged along like ghosts. On the second day, Claudia fell, scraping her knees on a jagged rock. She wanted to stay there. She felt done, with no more energy, faith, or logic left. Kneeling, she started sobbing wordlessly. El Gavilan strode by, not stopping. That's when a voice inside her, not her own, shouted, "Get up! You didn't come all this way to die. Amelia's alone. You still have milk in your chest and strength in your soul." Wiping her tears angrily, she stood, legs shaking, breath ragged, but she walked, step after step, dragging herself, biting down on the pain, moving forward. And she kept going. If you're enjoying this story, give it a like, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications to stay up to date with all our content. 2 nights later, they slipped through a broken fence. Beyond it lay Arizona. No glory, no flags, no lights or welcome. Just more dust, fear, and doubts. But they were on American soil again. El Gavilan hid them in a warehouse. A few hours later, a group of NGO volunteers arrived, hugging them, giving water, food, clean blankets. A young Mexican woman with a Chicano accent, Paula, looked her in the eye. "Are you Claudia Mendez, the mother of Amelia?" Claudia couldn't speak, only nodded. Paula hugged her tight, as though they'd known each other forever. "Your stories spread everywhere. Journalists, lawyers, moms, everyone wants to help. Let's go to the hospital, your daughter's waiting." Claudia got into their van in silence, her heart pounding so hard it hurt, clutching the baby blanket she'd carried, a blanket that still smelled like her. The hospital was 3 hours away, each mile an eternity, and Claudia finally allowed herself to cry openly in the back seat. The Los Angeles Children's Hospital was white, bright, almost unreal after such a hellish desert. Its glass doors slid open for Claudia, as though the world now recognized her presence. Nurses hurried by, mothers with babies, doctors wearing tired faces. People looked at her sideways, some curious, some compassionate, a few with tears. And no wonder. While she trudged through the desert, a volunteer's photo of her minutes after arriving on UAS. Soil had gone viral, kneeling, dusty hands, torn clothes, sun-scorched face, and a baby blanket pressed to her chest in desperation. She'd become known as La Madre del Desierto. Claudia had no idea and didn't care. She only wanted one thing behind one of those walls. A young doctor named Elena, speaking softly yet firmly, greeted her. She'd read about Claudia's case, but on meeting her, couldn't help holding her hand, as if trying to transmit strength by touch. Your baby's stable, but still not fully responsive. She's had a persistent fever, can't stop crying at night, and refuses to eat. The only time she reacted was hearing that audio of you. Once she knew you were coming, her vitals improved. Claudia shook, from urgency now, not fear. A nurse led her to the third floor, each step like scaling a mountain with no oxygen. On arriving at the ward, time stopped. Amelia lay in a white crib, hooked to tubes, with a small nasal cannula and monitors displaying every vital sign. Claudia's heart shattered. She wasn't the same newborn from the unfriendly hospital. Thinner, eyes closed, hair a bit longer, pale cheeks, but still her child. "May I?" asked Claudia, voice husky, glancing at the nurse. "She's your daughter. Go ahead." Claudia approached slowly. She touched Amelia's tiny hand with her fingertips. Amelia stirred. Barely, but she did. Then Claudia spoke, voice trembling yet steady. "My love, Mama's here. I didn't leave. I was taken away. But I crossed the world to come back. I'm here, my little one, right here." Amelia opened her eyes, one, then the other. Her pupils searched for something or someone. Once she sensed that voice, that presence, her tiny fist gripped Claudia's fingers hard. The heart monitor ticked upward slightly. Her body responded, a miracle that medical treatment alone hadn't produced. A bond no immigration paper could break was unfolding before everyone's eyes. The nurse covered her mouth to hold back tears. The doctor stood motionless. Claudia bent down, kissed her baby's forehead, letting the tears fall, not from sadness, but relief. "I swear I'll never let you be taken from me again. Never." Hours later, in the waiting area, an entire group from the NGO, reporters, lawyers, even human rights reps, surrounded Claudia, all wanting to know more or help. But she was drained, not physically, but in her soul. She only wanted to stay with her child, to hear her breathing, to watch her sleep. A young reporter, curly-haired and Miami-accented, approached gently. "Claudia, your story is moving the whole country. People are donating, demanding answers. You need to tell your truth. They want to hear you." Claudia merely answered, "I don't want fame or cameras. I just want my daughter with me. I don't care about the rest." Then came the most unexpected twist. An immigration officer arrived, holding a judicial order, accompanied by a lawyer from the NGO. Claudia's muscles went rigid. She assumed they'd rearrest her, separate her from Amelia again. But the lawyer eased her fears. "Listen. A federal judge has temporarily suspended your deportation order to re-examine your case. You can stay here while custody of Amelia is resolved." Claudia took a moment to take it in. "So, I can stay? For now, yes. You're legally protected until the process is over. And best of all, Amelia won't be given to anyone else. You're her mother. You have a voice, and you're no longer alone." Claudia closed her eyes, breathing deeply, feeling for the first time in so long a tiny seed of hope taking root. It wasn't the end, not even halfway. There was still a battle to fight, but after so much pain, dust, and silence, she could finally breathe again. And this time, she wouldn't let that breath go. Claudia spent the first night with Amelia on a makeshift cot in the hospital room. The baby slept soundly, weak but calm. The vital sign monitor beeped steadily, as if mother and daughter shared the same heartbeat. Claudia barely moved or blinked, running her fingers over Amelia's fine hair as if it was something sacred. She hadn't heard from Kyle since his brief appearance. She didn't know where he was or why he disappeared again. But she knew he didn't deserve Amelia. Someone who abandons, lies, and hides can't claim fatherhood. She'd learned that the hard way. Next morning, 2 lawyers from Madres Unidas por Justicia waited for her in the hospital break room. Claudia was still in her gown, face swollen from lack of sleep, spirit still bruised by the desert. One lawyer, a quiet-spoken, dark-skinned man, addressed her with respect yet candor. "Let's be clear, Claudia. Crossing back was illegal, but you did it for a legitimate reason, to save your daughter's life. Now, with all the publicity and awareness of your story, you have something many don't: visibility. That can protect you, but it also makes you a bigger target." Claudia listened, each word weighing heavily. "You need to decide if you're willing to share your story publicly, not just for you, but for other mothers who've gone through or are going through the same. We know there are more Claudias out there, many silent and voiceless out of fear." Claudia dropped her gaze, recalling Julia, Marta, Esther, the silent nights in Tia Rosa's house, and the women who never made it, who died or were left behind. "If my voice can help so another mother doesn't have to sign what I signed, then I'll do it," she said firmly. That began something she'd never imagined. First a community radio interview, then a piece in a local newspaper, then a national TV station wanted to film a short documentary about her trek. Claudia's face, now steadier, chin raised, full of resolve, began circulating everywhere, not as a victim, but as a symbol of resilience, the mother who crossed the desert with her heart in her arms. Meanwhile, Amelia's custody case progressed. Kyle was summoned but didn't show, sending only a letter relinquishing custody with no date. Another flight, another display of who he was, an absent father. Evidence of medical neglect, hospital reports, social services findings confirmed Amelia hadn't received proper care. That, plus Claudia's documented bravery, turned the scale in her favor. Yet it was far from over. The government could still argue Claudia was an illegal re-entrant. Immigration law is cold, technical, unyielding. Emotions don't matter before a migration judge, only facts, and the facts were that Claudia had been deported and came back without permission. The NGO filed a special request, humanitarian asylum for exceptional reasons, with medical, psychological, and social testimony. Each document included proof of the unbreakable bond between mother and child, the harm caused by their forced separation, and the emotional risk of tearing them apart again. During that time, Claudia and Amelia were given temporary housing in a shelter for migrant mothers with children in medical treatment, simple, communal, but safe. There, Claudia gradually rebuilt her life. She learned English with a volunteer using flashcards, washed dishes in a local church for a small wage, got donated formula, though her body resumed its own milk supply. Nursing Amelia made every hardship feel worth it. One night, changing her baby's diaper, Amelia looked at her and spoke her first word, "Ma." It was barely a whisper, a gentle breath shaped into a sound. Claudia froze and hugged her tightly, crying as never before, not from pain or rage, but triumph. That single word, "Ma," was all she needed. Confirmation that she hadn't braved the desert in vain, that her wounded body and path of blood, sand and silence had a purpose. Days later, an attorney at the NGO handed her an envelope. "Claudia, this is for you. The judge signed it this morning." Claudia opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a temporary ruling letting her stay legally while the custody case was ongoing. It wasn't a green card or citizenship, but it was sacred. The right not to be expelled again, to remain. Claudia looked at her daughter asleep in the makeshift crib, stroked her cheek, and sat beside her. For the first time since leaving Guatemala, she felt allowed to close her eyes without fear. She was no longer just a mother who crossed the desert. She was a woman who'd crossed every frontier imaginable, and she still had more to go. The final hearing day arrived under a gray Los Angeles sky. It was morning, and a light drizzle soaked the streets as if the weather wanted to wrap the city in respectful silence. Claudia woke before dawn, not just from nerves, though she felt them, but from habit. Ever since Amelia breathed peacefully in her arms again, her inner clock was ruled not by rest, but by caring for her. Amelia slept soundly, hugging a stuffed toy someone at the NGO had given her. Claudia watched her for a few minutes, as she always did, touching her forehead, tucking her in, whispering that everything would be okay. Then she dressed as well as she could, a navy blouse, borrowed dress pants, and the only closed shoes she could find in her size. She smoothed her hair by hand, looked in the mirror, and hardly knew herself. Something new shined in her eyes, determination, something the desert had etched there. The NGO organized everything: a ride, legal defense, a support group attending with her, volunteers, other migrant mothers, activists, journalists. They all knew her story and stood by her, but deep down, she felt it remained her personal fight. They entered the immigration court through a side door. Her lawyer, Camilla, gently placed an arm around hers. "You don't have to speak if you don't want to. We'll speak for you. But if you do choose to talk, speak from the heart, because that's what changed all this, your heart." The courtroom was plain: white walls, wooden benches, an air smelling of old files. On the bench, a serious-faced judge skimmed documents while the clerk announced their case. Kyle didn't appear, nor did his lawyer. He'd only sent a written statement renouncing custody, undated. Another escape, another proof of who he was. Claudia sat beside Camilla, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed ahead, breathing evenly, still as stone. Inside, she was boiling. The judge read the case history in a firm, unemotional but slightly empathetic tone. Claudia's detention, Amelia's birth in custody, the forced signing of the temporary papers, the subsequent deportation without proper medical care. Then the judge paused to detail the unauthorized re-entry, her desert crossing, her voluntary surrender upon arrival, Amelia's health status, and the immediate emotional effect when reunited with her mother. Camilla requested to show a short video, barely 30 seconds. That exact moment Amelia, hospitalized, opened her eyes on hearing Claudia's voice. The room fell silent. The baby's soft cries filled the air. Even the judge looked away briefly, as though needing to regain composure. The judge then turned her gaze to Claudia for the first time. "Mrs. Mendez, you have the right to remain silent. But if you wish to say anything before our decision, now is the time." Claudia didn't hesitate. She stood without notes, no translator. "Your Honor, I didn't know what being strong meant until they tore my daughter from my arms. I didn't know the desert until I walked through it with her milk still in my body. I didn't know how much I could endure until I realized a mother has no choice. You can say I broke the law. I did. But I did it out of love, and if I had to do it all again, I would, because being a mother shouldn't be a crime." Silence. The judge said nothing, only nodded slowly, wrote for several minutes, then lifted her eyes with a gentle but final tone. "This court acknowledges the unquestionable bond between mother and daughter. Based on the evidence, the father's abandonment, the child's medical records, and proven emotional harm caused by their separation, this court grants full, permanent custody of Amelia Mendez to her mother, Claudia Mendez Gonzalez. Likewise, Ms. Mendez's deportation order is suspended indefinitely, allowing her to remain in U.S. territory under humanitarian protection while her residency application is processed." Claudia didn't fully understand until she saw Camilla's tears, the muted applause in the chamber, and a volunteer whispering, "You did it," confirming what her heart already sensed. She'd won. Not just the right to remain in a country, but the right to be a mother without fear, to live free from hiding, to raise her child with dignity. That night, back at the shelter, Claudia held Amelia in her arms and stepped into the tiny patio. The sky was clear, stars shining as if wanting to witness that moment. Amelia slept calmly, her little head nestled against her mother's chest. Claudia watched her and whispered, "No more bars, my love. No more walls. Just you and me, and whatever's next." And whatever it was, she no longer feared it. Weeks passed after the hearing. Claudia and Amelia moved to a small apartment offered by a foundation for migrant mothers, a modest building in East L. Walls painted peach, a narrow kitchen, 2 rooms that shared a bathroom with 2 other mothers in similar situations. But for Claudia, it was a palace. She slept on a real bed, cooked with her own hands, had a window that let in morning light and sometimes a bird's song. Amelia had a new crib, a couple of stuffed animals, and most important, her mother's presence, her scent, her voice, her warmth. Claudia spent her first days on guard, despite the temporary papers, the legal permit, the court's ruling. Part of her kept expecting someone to show up saying, "It's over." Slowly, that fear lessened. It never left completely, but daily life has a power to heal even the deepest wounds. Amelia gained weight, smiled, laughed loudly like only a secure child can, calling her mother Mamita Linda, asking her to sing in Spanish at night. She clung fiercely. Any time Claudia moved more than a few steps away, Amelia cried as though afraid of losing her again. Claudia understood. Although Amelia didn't consciously remember their separation, her body did. Claudia now worked afternoons cleaning offices, leaving Amelia with a volunteer at the community house. Returning to work felt like breathing, like being useful, alive, remembering that her story wasn't just about wounds, but the promise of something more. One afternoon, an unannounced visitor arrived, Tia Rosa. She was there briefly to check on another woman from the network with a pending trial. They met in a cafe near Claudia's place. Claudia ran to embrace her, tears in her eyes, whispering, "I owe you my life." Tia Rosa smiled with those firm eyes, as though nothing surprised her. "You owe me nothing, child. Just keep going. Don't stop. That's how we change the world." They talked for hours. Tia Rosa told her other women in the network were starting to speak up, writing letters, recording their stories, and one had even managed to reunite with her son in Texas, all thanks to what Claudia did, her choice to keep going and keep talking. You opened a door many thought closed for good, but not all ghosts of the past had vanished. One Sunday, while Claudia hung laundry on the building's rooftop, her phone rang from an unknown number. She answered, voice tight. "Mrs. Claudia Mendez?" "Yes, who's calling?" "Officer Ramirez from Immigration. We need you to come in this week. There are updates on your case." Claudia froze. "What kind of updates?" she asked, holding her breath. "We'd rather explain in person. Bring your lawyer, please. It's important." Then the line clicked. Claudia's hands shook, her entire body seized by the same chill she felt that dawn ice raided her home, the same dread she'd felt on the deportation flight, the same that nearly stopped her in the desert. She messaged Camilla right away. That night, she didn't sleep, simply watching Amelia quietly playing with her stuffed bear, thinking, what if it was all temporary? What if they took her away again? What if the system changed its mind about giving her a chance? Next day, she went with Camilla to the immigration office and waited in a crowded room until they were led to a private meeting. Claudia's heart hammered as if it might burst. A female officer handed them an envelope. Inside was an official notice from USCIS. Claudia tried reading it in English. Camilla finished for her. "They've agreed to open your case for residency on extraordinary grounds. Your asylum process is now a priority due to your humanitarian background, your citizen child's custody, and the nationwide publicity of your case." Claudia was speechless. The officer added, "It's not residency yet, but it means you won't be deported. They're considering granting you a place here. Your fight is achieving real results." Claudia lowered her head, covering her face with her hands, not crying from sadness, but relief and the stunned feeling of not knowing how to handle fading pain. Camilla embraced her. "Now do you see why you should never have given up?" Stepping out of that building, Claudia walked with firm steps, Amelia in her arms, the sun no longer punishing but warming her like an embrace, a welcome. She still wasn't fully free. Much remained ahead. But for the first time since it all began, the horizon no longer looked so far away. A year and 2 months after that grey morning in court, Claudia walked through a Boyle Heights park, pushing a pink stroller where Amelia dozed peacefully, clutching her worn teddy bear as if the world was exactly what it should be. It was a sunny, mild afternoon, the kind that in Guatemala would be seen as a good omen. Claudia was no longer invisible, not just because of her media story, but because for the first time in her life, she dared hold her head high, look people in the eye, walk without hunching her shoulders. She still didn't have all her documents or citizenship, but she was a mother with a voice, pending rights, a recognized face, a memory that hurt but also taught her strength. She now lived in a tiny rented apartment thanks to her job at a hotel cleaning company, on the books, with payroll, medical coverage for her and Amelia, though she still feared official letters, official envelopes, and TV announcements. That fear no longer dictated her every move. Amelia walked, ran, laughed with that loud laughter of a safe child, calling her mum Mamita Linda, insisting she sing to her in Spanish each night. Her attachment was fierce. Each time Claudia moved more than a few meters away, the child would call her as if she might lose her again, and Claudia understood. Even if Amelia didn't recall her absence consciously, her body felt it. Claudia participated in discussions for migrant mothers, telling her story unadorned. She showed her C-section scar as easily as she smiled. Not a heroine, just a weary woman who remained standing, which was enough for many who needed hope. After one talk, a young Mexican woman approached her at the end, tears in her eyes and a 3-year-old on her hip. "I signed 2 months ago. They promised to give him back. I don't know where my son is." Claudia didn't say, "It'll be fine," or lie. She looked her in the eye, held her hand and said, "If you're willing to do the impossible, I'll help you cross whatever you have to. You're not alone." That night, back home, Amelia was asleep on her stomach, hugging the worn-out teddy bear. Claudia turned on the small kitchen light, took out a notebook, and began writing a letter, not for the government or Kyle or even her daughter, but for her mother. "Mum, I no longer talk to the sky with questions. Today I just want to tell you I made it. Your granddaughter sleeps beside me. I'm no longer afraid of the door, the uniform, or the silence. I crossed a desert truce, yes, but I also crossed guilt, shame, helplessness. I left them behind because you told me a mother doesn't give up, and I didn't, not even when the world abandoned me. Now I'm someone else. Not better or stronger, just different, more alive, more real. And I know you'd be proud if you saw me. Amelia has your eyes. Every time she calls me Mamita Linda, I feel you here. Thank you, because the courage you planted has borne fruit." She shut the notebook, kissed her daughter's forehead, turned off the light, and in the darkness, a smile surfaced on her face without effort. Because now she knew her story wasn't just her own, it was shared by thousands. And even if the world forgets, she declares it with every step. Being a mother was never a crime. And if you liked this story, you'll surely enjoy the next one that appears on your screen. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, give us a like, and activate notifications. Until next time.